All right, so sometimes you do have a custom hook that is pretty complicated, and making a custom component that uses that hook in the way that it should be used is a little bit difficult, and especially when you want to cover some edge cases and things, and it makes your tests a little difficult to read. So what we're going to do is actually change this a little bit, and instead of having a custom hook like this, and instead of having a custom test function like this, we're actually going to make a function test component. And inside of here, we're going to call useCounter, but we're going to assign the result to this result variable that we'll define out here. And then we'll say return null so that this can be a valid component. And we'll render this test component instead. And because it's rendering nothing, we can't get anything from the screen, but we do have access to all the methods and the state in this result object. So let's just ditch all of this stuff and let's console.log this result just to get a look at what that is. All right, so we've got our object with count, increment, and decrement. Sweet, so we can get the same type of assertion that we had here by saying expect result.count to be 0. All right, so that gets us all rocking and rolling. And then we want to call result.increment and expect the count to now be 1. So if we save that, our test is passing, but now we're getting an error right here, and it's saying, hey, this is happening when you're calling setCount. We're getting a state update, but we weren't expecting an update of our state, so you may be missing something. And so you need to use our special function act so that you can indicate that, yes, you do indeed expect a state update to happen. And after that state update happens, we'll go ahead and flush all the effects for you so that your component can be stable. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to import act from React Testing Library, which actually just re-exports act from React Test Utils. And then we'll wrap this action that we took in act. So we'll save that, and then poof, we've got a green test with no warning. Awesome. Let's just do this over again with decrement. And we're off to the races. If we come down here and console log right there, then we're back to a count of 0. If we move it before we click decrement, then our count is 1. So yeah, things are working super awesome. We can get rid of this commented out code. And now we don't need user event anymore because we're not actually interacting with the DOM. And now we've got a simple test component that simply assigns that result to whatever we get back from useCounter, and then we interact with that result here. This can be really useful if it's difficult to create a component that resembles the way that people typically use your hook, especially for covering different edge cases. So in review, what we did here is create this test component, assign the result of useCounter to this variable that we could interact with. And in particular, I wanted to mention again that the act function here is basically just telling React, hey, I'm going to do something that's going to trigger an update. And after my callback is all finished, I want you to flush all of the side effects, the React useEffect callbacks and everything, so that my next line of code has a stable component to interact with, so we don't end up with some sort of intermediary state where our effects haven't actually been run yet. This was not necessary before because we were using user event, which wraps everything in act calls, but it is now necessary because we are calling that setCount directly through this increment function call. And because of that, we have to manually wrap this in act. This is one of the very few situations where you actually do have to use the act utility from React Test Utils, which is re-exported for us from React Testing Library.